Okay. Oh, yeah, it's working. All right. So, welcome to this session, and thank you so much for making it here to be with us this morning on a Sunday morning. I'm gonna just introduce myself and then just talk about a bit of housekeeping information for those folks that are physically in the room. And then I'll introduce the panel and just talk a little bit about why we wanted to come together today to have this conversation. So I'm China Mills and I work at Healing Justice London doing research and also leading the Deaths by Welfare project, which kind of put together some of the exhibition that we're sat amongst here now. I'm going to do the really boring but quite important bit first and just a little bit of housekeeping, so apologies if you've come before and heard all of this already. But very important information, starting with toilets, which are located on the floor above here, which is the ground floor, and they're just near the reception desk. So if you use stairs, you would go out just probably where you signed in, and you go up 2 short flights of stairs through like a little gate, and they're just round the side of the reception through the double doors, and there's someone there to ask if you need to. Or there's a lift also just at the bottom of those stairs, and you just go up to the ground floor, so just press G. We're not expecting any fire alarm tests, so if we do hear one, we'll just need to evacuate the building. If you're in this space, then the nearest fire exit is just down that little corridor there, past our sort of rest and restoration space, the curtained area, okay? And you'd follow the stairs up and head through the fire escape door and exit the building and follow the road right onto Brixton Road. Okay. And if you're in the front gallery near the sign-in desk, the closest fire exit is probably where most of you will have come in, okay? So to the left of the sign-in desk where you've got your masks, and again onto Brixton Road, and then head to the front of the Bedwell House flats, and that's the same meeting space, okay? And we have an evacuation swing available to use if anybody needs that. We've got an induction loop fitted, and I think you should all be all right. So it's best within this carpeted area. So if you need to adjust to that, please make sure that you're kind of seated in that area. And then with a lot of appreciation, we have 2 brilliant BSL interpreters with us today, Nanaya and Darren. So thank you so much for being here. And the event is being streamed and being recorded, okay? So we have folks joining us online as well. Okay. Let me check where I am. Okay. So yeah, I wanted to just quickly introduce the kind of idea for this panel and for this session, but I feel like I can't begin talking about state violence without recognising and naming the current genocide that's happening in Palestine and the ongoing occupation and settler colonisation of Palestine by Israel with support from multiple governments, including the UK's. And that really hit home for me last Saturday, when I went to the United Family and Friends campaign, the UFFC March, which happens every year, and I think we will hear a bit more about from our speakers, which was held like alongside and then flowed into a big protest and coming together in support of Palestine. And being in both of those spaces really brought out the importance of just that kind of cross-movement solidarity and international solidarity the world over, of how state violence is so connected in different contexts. And I'm also just reminded of the words and actions of disability justice collectives like Sins Invalid, Autistic People of Colour Collective, and the Abolition and Disability Justice Collective, who make it really clear that disability justice cannot exist under colonialism, current occupation and apartheid. So I've been leading the Deaths by Welfare project for a few years, and we investigate how the welfare system in the UK disables people and has led to many people's deaths. But also a core part of that is disabled people's resistance and real defiance of these life-threatening policies. And that's something that we try to uplift and celebrate in this exhibition here now, and that lots of people in this room have been involved with in many different important ways. And I think doing that work made me realise that people's deaths linked to the welfare system aren't always named as deaths from state violence. Yet the state is the perpetrator of those deaths and of that harm, even as it kills people often at a distance and often quite slowly through bureaucracy. And different forms of state violence connect so deeply in many people's lives, and I think we could probably all relate to this in different ways. So the violence of the mental health system, of the criminal legal system, policing, welfare, social services, immigration, they all kind of tangle together in a knot. And so this is why we wanted to bring together these brilliant speakers in this session. So we wanted to make links across different experiences of state violence, so families who are bereaved by different forms of state violence, often interconnected. And so specifically here, the welfare system, the mental health system and policing. And it continues a conversation that we started as part of our Deaths by Welfare podcast, and it was our 5th episode that kind of officially came out last week. So please do listen to that if you haven't already, and included these wonderful speakers and another couple of people also. And I suppose our dream for this space today was to continue that conversation, for families to talk about campaigning and grief, solidarity, care, different journeys of healing, and also think together about justice and whether justice, different understandings and journeys to justice, both kind of within and also outside of the state, okay? And it really made me think quite a lot, and I often make this link because I read a lot of work by Mariam Kaba, but I was thinking about the concluding chapter of the book, Let This Radicalise You, and that chapter is called Beyond Doom, Radical Collective Action. And I was thinking that in that they name how we don't get the space to collectively come together to grieve, and also for the solidarity that comes from that grieving. And I'm really hopeful, and I know that this space today will provide that. And that this is just a conversation for one connecting thread, I suppose, for cross-movement solidarity, to form a tapestry that grows and solidifies our ecosystems of resistance. Okay. So what we're going to do today now is I'm going to introduce our speakers, because none of them wanted to introduce themselves, which I find is a common theme. And then we're going to move into having some very broad kind of questions that we've all agreed together, and some conversation. We'll have a break, and then we will come for about 15 minutes, and then we'll come together and have a chance for you to join in that conversation if you've got questions or comments or anything that you would like to share. Okay, so let me introduce our wonderful speakers. So Ajibola Lewis, who is sat right next to me, is Shani Lewis's mother, and so a proud mother of 3 children and of 2 grandsons. She's a former teacher and lawyer who now spends her time campaigning for accountability and justice in the many cases concerning deaths in state custody across the UK. Aji also works alongside her family to embed the Mental Health Unit's Use of Force Act, which was started in 2018, or is also known as Cheney's Law, in all mental health units across the country, and to bring more awareness to mental health and human rights violations happening in the UK. Anna Sasianta, who is sat just in the middle here, her 17-year-old son Jack was killed by police in 2015 while suffering a mental health crisis, and Anna will talk to us about your work with UFFC and Inquest, and does some wonderful work. And then Imogen Day, who I've done lots of work with on the Deaths by Welfare project, but for the first time met in person today, which has been very special, is the sister of Philippa Day, who died in 2019 after 28 mistakes were made in her personal independence payment, her PIP application. Imogen has campaigned for disability benefit reform ever since, working with Dispatches, Disability News Service, Museum of Austerity, Rethink Mental Illness, and with us at Healing Justice. So it's so wonderful to have you three here as part of our Rehearsing Freedoms Festival and in our final week of the festival. It means a lot to me personally. So we had a chat about how we should start this session, and what we thought would be a nice way to open is if you could tell us about Cheney, about Jack, about Pip, and tell us about what did they love about life, and maybe something about what happened, about their story. I don't know who would, Adji's going to start, are you?
Anna's told me I've got to start. Hi everybody, lovely to see people in person and those online. Yeah. Cheney was a bit of his character actually, an adventurer. He was always the first to put his hand up to do something, you know, or volunteer. Yeah, he, one story that I like, at school when he was about 12, 13, the headmaster called me and I thought, oh gosh, what's happened now? And he said that I wanted to know that Cheney's going to work in my office for the rest of the day. I said, why? And he said, well, Cheney and his friends were playing football on the pitch, and one of the older boys came and took their ball and wouldn't give it back. So he said, well, Cheney wasn't having it. I know Cheney, he wouldn't have that. Hated bullies, hated people who were horrible to other people. You know, he loved the marginalized. You know, he had a real heart for people. Anyway, Cheney went and picked up the cricket bat and threatened the older boy, who gave them their ball back. But Cheney got into trouble because he didn't tell the teachers, he just did it. So the headmaster said, but I want to tell you that while I was taking him up to my office, there's a big sort of staircase. He said all the children were coming from the last lesson, and they were all shaking Cheney's hand and saying, well done, well done. And he said, I couldn't help but sort of try not to smile, but he said, yeah, everybody knew he stood up to the bully. So he worked in the headmaster's office for that day, but the older boy had to work from home for the rest of the term. So, yeah, he was a bit like that. He, loved life, wasn't good all the time. You know, we had our run-ins, you know, like you do with all 23-year-olds or younger. But he had a heart for the marginalized. He really loved people, and you know, and if we were going out and I saw somebody begging, he'd say, Mum, give them some money. And, I'd take a pound out. He said, is that all? He was, yeah. That was the sort of person he was.
You talking about Shaney and doing your film, R.I.P. Shaney, has made me feel as if I've known him. It's really lovely. And I think he'd be very good friends with Jack. Jack, as a little boy, loved friendship, thank you, most. And he'd always notice in primary school if anyone did. He was very observant, and he never wanted anyone to be left out. So he would always want to include everyone, and made some really, really good friends. And then he realized that in this world, friendship doesn't always come to everybody, and that things aren't equal. And he got really passionate about making things fair, and in the whole world making it fair. His dad is from Indonesia, and every other year we used to go, since he was 6 weeks old, in the summer holidays and spend time living in his dad's village. And he noticed a lot of things there, like I'm the only one who has football boots, everyone else is playing in bare feet, things like that. And it meant a lot to him, and he really thought about things. And then in secondary school, his sort of beliefs and enthusiasm about life kind of developed, and it was mainly through his friendship groups. So I decided to bring the book that his friends made when he died, when he was 17, so they can tell you, because although he was really loving and fantastic at home, it's different when you're at home with your mum. So I'm going to read a couple of them, of what they said, if that's okay. So Ned said, Jack was the one boy I could always relate to. He would always want to speak and chill. I have so many fond memories with Jack. Late night bike rides with me, Jack and Jessie didn't beat any other rides. He would always be happy and cheery, shouting out random words that would make me laugh too much. He was very funny. Jack was always a caring boy, being the first person to back someone up if they got in trouble. The memory of him protecting me from a drunk man will always stay with me. I loved Jack, and not having his company anymore makes me feel like a piece of me is missing. His cheeky smile and distinctive laugh will be missed so much. And another boy said, Jack, if I could see you one last time, I'd watch you play football. You were incredible. If there was anyone to look up to, it was you. I know we had our differences at times, you like Arsenal, but you'd always take time to speak to me and show how passionate you were about football. I wish I could see your smiling face one last time. I hope you're at peace. And then the last one is from Rowan, who was very mature for his age. The first time I met Jack, I thought he was the coolest boy ever, dressed as Gandhi with a girl under his arm. After this, I realized he was also the sweetest boy ever. I loved Jack for his smile, his loyalty, and how close he was to everyone. Old man Jack will be missed dearly. He was called the granddad of the group.
I think all of our loved ones would get along very well. So Pip was 27 when she died, and like both of your loved ones, she had a really strong sense of justice, the importance of friendship and community connections. Something that really stood out to me was in her last few years, she was suffering multiple mental health crises. And in the few months before her death, a man had collapsed in the street outside of her home. And because of her hypervigilance, she always had her blinds open so she could see the moment that he collapsed. And she immediately, despite her agoraphobia, rushed out into the street and delivered first aid, called the ambulance, and set everybody straight in what they should be doing to support him and make him comfortable until the ambulance came. And she really crisis managed that situation. Obviously, it exhausted her afterwards, and I think she struggled with the trauma of that. But she would have done anything for anyone. She was the kindest soul I've ever known. In the eulogy I gave at her funeral, I described her as the sun and that we all revolved around her, and that continues even in her death. I will always continue to revolve around her and focus my efforts on making sure that this doesn't happen again.
Thank you all so much. I feel from hearing some of these stories that I know Pip and Jack and Shani, and it's so, yeah, I feel like you've brought them so wonderfully into the space and that we're with them in spirit right now. So thank you so much. Now, I know we talked about this and we'd said that it's important perhaps to share some of the story around what happened, but that can be in as little or as much detail as you would like it to be. I thought you, Imogen, said something really important when we were chatting, which was don't sanitize your grief for other people, which is very kind of on brand for Imogen, I thought. But also holding that we are all listening in this collective process. And if folks just need a bit of time out, there's a lovely little area to go and sit there or go and have a wander. There's absolutely no judgment if you need to leave the space and then come back or whatever feels right for you. But do you want to share just what feels kind of right to then go into our conversation about solidarity and justice in terms of what happened to Pip?
So Pip always felt very deeply throughout her entire life. As a young child, she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. So she had experience with a disability from a very young age and had received a disability living allowance from being a very small child. During her teenage years, she started to struggle more with her mental health, and this led to her being diagnosed with emotionally unstable personality disorder and agoraphobia. She just felt everything in the world so acutely and really struggled to manage her emotions. She was advised by her community psychiatric nurse a couple of years before she died that she would be receiving a higher rate if she transferred from disability living allowance to the personal independence payment. And she was supported by myself, a charity in Nottingham called Framework, and her community psychiatric nurse to put that application in. There were, as China said, 28 mistakes in the handling of that application. The first one was lost, the second one wasn't recorded properly, and these mistakes ranged from mundane admin errors to egregious decisions made by decision makers, such as the refusal to give a home visit, a home assessment. Now, her CPN, her family, we all advocated for her very strongly that she would require a home assessment. My sister never left the house unsupported, and even if we were able to get her to the assessment centre that was in the next town, she would not have been able to engage in that process because she wasn't in her own environment and she didn't feel safe. That request was denied because my sister, because of her mental health, basically, they said that it would be a risk to the assessor being there, even with her CPN present, her dad present, and obviously I also offered to be there with her for that assessment. Something that China said really struck me was that state violence kills people really slowly, and each one of those 28 mistakes took something from my sister. It stole a piece of her every single time, and when she received the final letter from the DWP informing her that she was not entitled to a home assessment and would need to attend the assessment centre, it destroyed her. I tried to console her. I tried to support her emotionally through that, but we all knew that it was a losing battle. And despite being able to visit her whenever she needed and support her on over the phone, she just told me that she wanted to be alone. And the next day, I went to go we have a regular lunch date, and I went to go and pick her up for that lunch date, and I found her unconscious with that letter beside her head. She wanted to make it incredibly clear to all of us that it was DWP in capita that had led her to make that decision, and it wasn't anything that we could have done differently. I'm incredibly grateful to her for that, for making it so clear that our love wasn't enough to counteract the effect of that state violence, and it's something that means that I can still sleep at night and I can still process this grief, knowing that she loved me and I loved her, and outside forces stole her from me.
Thank you. Jack was very passionate and enthusiastic, but he was also incredibly sensitive, and he hid his anxieties to do with that so that other people didn't know. And that's what led him then, as a teenager, to find himself in a mental health crisis. He went with 20 of his friends to a festival called the Secret Garden Party, and he had an amazing time, but it rained all the way through, and one of his friends left was a bit in distress. He then came home, and it appeared immediately that he was not himself. He'd never had a psychotic episode before, and we did our best to look after him. He ended up in A&E, and there was a fantastic psychiatrist who was able to bring him down from his fear, which was that everyone was going to kidnap him, and helped him to understand where he was. And he, without any medication, he came out of his mental distress and was very emotional. And his brother and I spent the night with him in A&E. And in the morning, after a kind of 15-minute conversation, which apparently was supposed to be an hour, he was deemed that he was no longer in a mental distress, and he was allowed to go home. And the next day, the same thing happened to him. He just had to get away from everyone. And I'd asked him the night before, how did you feel when you thought they were all going to catch you and take you? And he said, well, I knew you were my mum, but you weren't my mum. So I kind of started to understand. And in the hours when he wasn't highly charged, fearful, he was incredibly emotional and cried, and we all lay in bed. He said, I want you all to lie in bed with me. So we all got into bed, all four of us. And he was just, you could feel the stress in his body, and if you moved, he would get fearful. I sent his dad to work because his dad couldn't really cope with it. So he went off to work, and his brother sat on the internet trying to look up what to do and what this thing was. And then he suddenly, I think he heard a baby crying, and it triggered him to go into the fearful psychotic state. And he, in only the way that Jack could, he did the most amazing karate kick and smashed the front window and jumped through it. And he punched his brother first, who was trying to stop him from doing anything, and ran off. So I did thing that I regret, which is call the police, because he just had sort of pants and socks, and I don't know if he did have a t-shirt on. And we live by the Lee River and the canal in Hackney, and he'd already been lost the night before, and the police had found him at like 1 o'clock in the morning, which is how he got into A&E. So off he went, and everyone was looking for him. And in the inquest, the police wrote in their statement, "As luck would have it, we were driving down the Lea Bridge Road from an incident in Walthamstow." Well, it wasn't luck for Jack, because it killed him. It was the Territorial Support Group, who no longer exist, who are a bunch of thugs and sort of considered the riot police, who heard on the radio that a boy was missing, and they thought, oh, we'll help. And they knew that he was having a psychosis. So they all got out, and they followed a line of blood that they found in the marshes, because he'd cut himself while jumping through the window. And then they looked up, following the trail of blood, and he was jogging along, and they went, "Jack." And then they had an almighty chase. Well, you can imagine how he was feeling then. And he jumped into the canal. A crowd quickly of up to 100 people, because it was like 3:30 in the afternoon, at the end of July, gathered, and the police held everybody back. I've met some other mums who said, well, we were taking our shoes and socks off, we were going to jump in. They stopped anyone from going in, and they refused to go in and save him. They were like in the inquest, oh, well, he must have done it to himself because you said he could swim. And yeah, they just had no understanding. But the crowd did, and a lot of them I've met since and said, oh, if only I'd just said, oh, hello, are you all right? It might have helped him to kind of calm down, but it just didn't happen like that because they were so full on chasing him. And there's no way they would have caught him because he was a really good runner. And yeah, he came up and down 6 times, but he did a thing that's called a quiet drowning, where you don't show that you're in distress and help. He had a helicopter above, making all the water go choppy. And one of the spectators was a psychiatric nurse, and he told me later that he thought Jack was really terrified. I think he really used to like Lord of the Rings, and I think he was thought it was as scary as being in the Lord of the Rings film when you're being chased. So, yeah, that's how he died. And the next few years was all about the police disassociating themselves with what they'd done.
Shaney, a bit like Jack, was 23. He was older, but he was 23 and had just done his master's and wanted to go and do his PhD in America. And he went out with a group of people who we never knew about. Well, we didn't know. They weren't his normal friends. You know, it was after he died we wanted to ask questions, but it was too late. So he went out. He said, Mum, I'm going out. This is the August bank holiday. I'm going out. And he went out, came back, and I was nursing my youngest grandson. So I said, oh, you're back? And he said, yes. they gave me something bad, or I had something bad. I never didn't have time to question him, because as soon as he knew I was worried, he said, "Don't worry, after I've left these people, whoever they were, and I went to my best friend who had brought him home. And he had this only episode of psychosis, and over the bank holiday weekend, we noticed he became very agitated and unsettled, and in the middle of the night wanted to go out for a walk and come with him. Well, I wasn't going to do that, and I didn't want him out on his own anyway. Persuaded him not to. And the next day he said he would go to A&D. You have this vision of America, where they have, you go to the hospital and they pump your stomach out or whatever. You have this stupid idea. Anyway, we all agreed, his father, myself, his best friend, and we went to A&D, and he didn't settle. He ran out. So they called the police, and the police found him and calmed him down, brought him back. And people were quite nice. The security were nice, and they said, look, he should go to the 136 suite at the Maudsley Hospital. So his father and best friend took him about 4 in the morning, and I was looking after my mum who had dementia, so I went to get her up and give her breakfast, and then I slept a bit, only to be woken up to say he'd walked out of the Maudsley, and could I come? And he was questioning whether he'd killed me or not. So anyway, I went, and by that time they'd got him back. That was good police practice. The police at Lewisham took off their jackets, took off their hats, whatever they were, and went on the station, the platform. He was sitting on the platform, and they were worried he might jump, so they were saying, should we turn off the electricity, stop the trains, whatever. Anyway, they went down on a level, de-escalated the situation, talked to him, made him laugh, calmed him down, and then said, look, mate, this isn't a good place. It's rush hour, come back to the hospital. So he went back. And by the time I got there, a 136 suite has no furniture except rubber benches or rubber sort of cushions and a rubber mattress, I suppose, on the floor. So it's nothing there. So the police were sitting round, and he was there, and they were laughing. And Shani always liked a pretty face, and there were some really nice police women officers there, so they were laughing and talking. So when I came, they left. And I was told that the mental health team would come and interview him and myself. So in the afternoon they came, and they said to me, well, he can go home. And I said, how can he go home? How am I going to manage him? He's already wanted to go out in the middle of the night walking. He's agitated. How would I manage? Big regret. Big regret. So they said, okay, as a voluntary patient, he should go into the Bethlehem Hospital. That was the hospital for Croydon residents. So we took him there in the afternoon, and I didn't like it. When I got there, I thought, this place is very noisy, chaotic. People were shouting. I didn't even know who the staff were and who the patients were. It was awful. Anyway, we settled him, got him some food, got him some clothes, and left about 8:30. I saw them take my number twice. yes, if he wants to come home, he's a voluntary patient, he can come home at any time. So we left. But do you know what? You see, a mum's, you know in your soul there's something not right. So I was going to sleep in my car just for an hour or so to see. I wasn't happy. But my eldest daughter said, Mum, they've got your number, they'll call you. Come home, you're tired. So I went home, slept off, only to be called about 10 o'clock by his best friend to say that he had called the hospital to see how Shani was settling, only to be told there'd been an incident and we should all go to A&E. And he asked, have you called his mother? No, we don't have her number. Anyway, we went off to A&E and found him on a life support machine. And it's interesting, as we walked in the family room, 3 police officers stood up, very awkwardly. Oh, I didn't know who they were. We didn't know what had happened. And they said, oh, you're so lucky, he was resuscitated by somebody, and yeah, he's on life support. And I thought, well, what's happened? You don't think. All you want is to get him better, get him out. Anyway, he was on life support for about 4 days. We're a Christian family, and we were praying, and we had all sorts of people were supporting us, and then they did a stem cell test and said he was brain dead. The only thing we knew was when the Evening Standard knocked on our door and said, a whistleblower has called us and told us what happened to your son. Do you know what happened? I said, no. So they said, we're going to run the story. I said, yeah. So we know. Anyway, they ran the story. And I'd just like to read you something that came up in the Evening Standard and at the inquest. Thank you. The doctor, all right, was watching. The doctor and nurses were outside while the police were inside the room. They handcuffed Shani, took him down the stairs to the seclusion room. When he got to the door, he knew what it was, so he put his hands on the door frame. They pushed him in onto his stomach. And then they tried to do what they call a cell exit, which is what you do in a police cell, apparently, which is you get out, the police get out, and the person stays in. But Shani was an athlete and boxer and did all sorts of football and stuff, so he was quite fast. So he got to the door before some of the police were able to get out. So they battened him, pushed him back in, handcuffed him like this, with 2 sets of handcuffs on his stomach, 2 sets of leg braces, and restrained him for a total of about 45 minutes in 2 sets of restraint. And at the inquest, they said, oh, we were so hot, we had to ask for water. We took our jackets off. And the coroner said, what about the person you were restraining? Don't you think they were hot and needed water? But of course, let me not say what I want to say. Anyway, the police don't think. Anyway, so they did this until he went limp, and in their wisdom, the police thought he was pretending, he was faking it. So they left the room when they should have given him CPR. He might have survived. They left the room, saw he wasn't moving, found the key, couldn't find the key, came back in and did CPR. They're very good. They resuscitate the body, but of course the brain is starved of oxygen for 45 minutes. So it's very rare that you recover. But this is what the doctor said, and I think he was a whistleblower. because the same words he said, they printed in the Evening Standard, is what he was said at the inquest. He said, I felt like it wasn't a human being that they were trying to restrain. It was like trying to contain an animal. After they'd tied him up with the straps, it seemed like when a hunter has tied the animal, it was an uneasy feeling that I had, that this was not a human being that they were restraining. The doctor was watching. The nurses were watching, unable or unwilling to help. Don't call police into hospitals. They have no idea. They're not trained. That's why I don't think police should be called to mental health incidents. They either taser you or kill you. Don't call them. Anyway, it took us 7 years to get an inquest. And we finally did, and the jury found that it was unnecessary, excessive, disproportionate restraint and force that had killed Shaney. I tell this story because nobody believes it. It's online, it's all in the inquest, and everything is online. People don't realize what is happening. They don't realize. So I tell the story. It upsets me, but it has to be said.
Thank you all so much. At the United Family and Friends campaign march, they did something which I thought was really powerful, and maybe it would be nice to just take a minute to do that here. And I think, so if I say the name, if I say the names of some of the people we're talking about today, if you want to, and it's an invitation, if you would just say, we remember, or just maybe remember, would be fine if you don't want to say it, just as a way to honour what we've just heard. Okay, so Shaney, we remember. Jack, we remember. And Philippa, Pip, we remember. Thank you all so much. And I think this might sound strange, but when we recorded our podcast together, we heard some of these stories. But it was also a really joyful conversation. And when I spoke to Imogen this morning, she said, I'm really excited about this conversation today. Does that sound weird? And I thought, no, it doesn't at all. And I think one of the things that was joyful, if you like, about it, or so important, was that you all talked about finding other people in different ways who had also lost loved ones, who shared some understanding and shared some experience. And we talked about what that kind of solidarity looked like in practice, in every day, and what it meant to you all. And I wondered if you wanted to share some of that with us now. Anna, do you want to? Yeah? Imogen, you go ahead.
So obviously losing a loved one like this is traumatic and horrific, but the light that's been there for me has been meeting amazing people who have held me and supported me in this space, guided me through the process of requesting an inquest, what that should look like, as well as obviously putting me in touch with amazing people like China to continue on this work. There are a couple of people that were a part of the podcast that weren't here today, but Alison Turner, Errol Graham's daughter-in-law, is someone that I've spoken to quite often, as well as Joy Dove, the mother of Jodie Whiting. And grief can be incredibly isolating, especially state grief. It's really difficult to share with people that haven't experienced political violence, because there isn't that inherent understanding of the fact that the perpetrator is somebody that should protect you. It's somebody that should keep you safe and support you throughout your life. And meeting these amazing women has been so healing, and it's really empowering. We all go on for each other. It's not just our own loved ones that we fight for all of them. And to do so is a great privilege.
I feel so the same. So you don't know what to do in the first few years. I think I must have been in a dream for about 5 years. And you feel very isolated. And you don't know what to do. But then you meet people like Imogen and Aji, and you have a sense of solidarity, friendship, love, and you see the way that you can move on. So for me, it was meeting, well, first of all, the first people who really impacted on my life were my caseworker from Inquest and my solicitor, who I saw the solicitor again for the first time this week, since 8 years ago. And I was so pleased to see him and realized how much he meant for me and what he'd done for me. Then the same was the case for the caseworker. She's left Inquest, but she's my friend for life. It's so nice because she's been through it with our family, step by step, of the horrible state inquest that you have to go through that is the second worst thing from losing someone in your family. Then I didn't feel a great need to start a campaign for Jack Susianta because he didn't believe that you should be on your own. He felt that we should be together, and I didn't think he'd want me to put his name forward like that. So, as I met other families who'd done such amazing things in their fights for justice, I just made friends with them and supported them through inquest families, through events, through some of the healing ways that you've talked about in this room, about how to come alive again for us, through artwork, of campaigning, all the different ways of well-being that could help me get back on my feet again. And it's been so joyful to do that, and to meet the other families has been a real pleasure and an honor, really. And I didn't mention UFFC, so you can mention.
I don't know if everybody knows about the charity Inquest. They're the only charity that support families of those who died in state custody, and they have just celebrated their 40th year. A wonderful charity, very small, don't accept state funding. They struggle, but they are wonderful. They have caseworkers, and I got to know Inquest the day after we turned off the life support machine. We went to church, and it's really coincidental. One of the people that approached us was a younger sister of of Sean Rigg, his sister Sam. She's a younger sister of Marcia Rigg. Everybody knows Marcia. And Sam said to me, listen, I'm going to get you a lawyer. And she called up the director. And I thought that was so impressive to have the director's contact details, and call her up on a Sunday. And they said, okay, by Monday, you'll have a lawyer. And then she said, we're going to call the coroner on court, the coroner on duty of the weekend. So we did, and she said, you tell her not to do an autopsy until you can be represented. So I said, when are you doing she said, we're doing it this afternoon. This is what they try and do. Do it quickly, so the family are not there and don't know what's happening, So I said, no, please don't do that. And she said, we've got it planned. I said, don't, because I'm a lawyer, and I'm going to sue you if you do that. I mean, I wasn't, but it was enough to stop her. Anyway, they stopped, and then we were able to get our own oh gosh, what do you call a guy who does an autopsy? Anyway, we were get our own witness there, and so that's what we did. Yeah, so that was something that I learned straight away. Otherwise, I didn't know what to do. You know, we were in the IPCC, as it was then, Independent Police Complaints Commission, which is now the IOPC, were calling, oh, this is your support worker. We work, we're going to investigate, we work with the police. As soon as they said that, I thought, don't come to my house. I don't want you. Don't you dare come. But they kept ringing and ringing. Anyway, we, like I said, waited 7 years for this inquest, and we met our wonderful lawyer, Raju Bhatt, who has done this sort of, has done these cases for 30 years or more, so he was fantastic. It was like people holding your hand, because we didn't know anything. We didn't even know about UFFC, United Family and Friends of Those Who Died in State. We didn't know anything. It's only inquest that told us all about this and supported us. I'd just like to do a couple of quotes. You know, I always say, two of my favorite, Mark Twain is supposed to have said, nobody likes change except a baby in wet diapers. And that is so true. Nobody likes change. But James Baldwin, another favorite writer, said not everything can be changed that is faced, but nothing can be changed unless it's faced. And that is why I campaign. Listen, they want you to lie down and die. I am stubborn. I'm stubborn. And I'm also old, so that gives me the courage. And I keep saying, what are you going to do, kill me? You know, I'm 74. So you cannot stop me telling the truth. And that is why I fight. I fight, because I'm so stubborn. It's taken its toll on my family and me, but you can't kill people and get away with it. I'm not having it.
You know, this was something else I think that came through in our conversation, the podcast, where Ajay, you talked about your stubbornness, and I think at one point Imogen said, I'm just running on spite. And I thought this sort of the power of grief to actually fuel that kind of transformation is incredible. What I think would be a good idea now, as someone who constantly needs loo breaks, is that we have a 15-minute break. And then we come back together and we're going to talk a little bit about justice and about whether that's even possible and people's different journeys towards that. And then have time to bring you all into the conversation if you would like to. Okay, so thank you so much to our speakers so far and to you for listening. We'll be back in 15 minutes, okay? Thank you. so welcome back. I hope you managed to get some refreshments and just have a bit of a breather then. So we're going to basically have a quick last discussion about justice and then just open up to any questions that you might have, okay? And then we'll finish at 1. So to start that conversation off, and I think we've kind of touched on this a little bit. This is actually telling Anna what she's got to say. So we had a chat before this session, and there were lots of great ideas that came up, so we were taking notes. I suppose one of the things that really comes up in these conversations and has with the deaths by welfare work is, can there ever be justice? What would that look like? And also people's very different understandings of justice and different journeys towards that, I suppose, and particularly the kind of justice that a lot of us have been told to think of or socialised into thinking of, like within the state and within state machinery, and actually also dreaming of and imagining other forms of justice that might be outside of that, so not letting our imaginations be so constrained by that in some ways. So I wondered if anyone wants to start telling us. Do you want to have a go? And if you're going to start, then that's perfect. Because I was thinking maybe you would share something about being the first family, I think, to see one of the reviews into deaths linked to the benefit system and the kind of, and the inquest and the mistakes found, and yeah. Over to you. Thank you, love.
So our family was strangely lucky. We had an amazing coroner who really delved into the heart of what had happened with Capita and the DWP. So we had our first pre-inquest review of, I think it was about 6, where I got a bit sassy and said, the DWP and Capita need to be here. They need to answer for this. We've got questions for them that they need to answer. And I remember there was 2 DWP lawyers at the first pre-inquest review and a representative from the DWP. Oh, and I was feeling so bitter that day. It was one of the hottest days in England that we had that year. And I was stressed and I was grieving. And while we were processing our emotions during a break at the inquest, I could just hear these giggles and laughter coming from this lawyer and this DWP representative. And I said very, very loudly that I was so pleased that they found my sister's death amusing and had forgotten why we were there that day. After numerous pre-inquest reviews, we ended up with, I think it was either an 11 or a 12-day inquest. During the COVID pandemic, it was all online. So it felt like I had lawyers and solicitors and medical and DWP professionals in my living room while it was snowing outside, and it was one of the weirdest experiences of my life, of having to bring all of this home with me. It took the coroner 3 whole hours to read out every single mistake that was made and the impact that mistake had on the processes that followed. And so I come from a research background. I've done my undergrad in politics and my master's in domestic and sexual violence, so I researched heavily in the DWP deaths when Pip died. And I came across some amazing work from John Pring about the existence of internal process reviews, which is where the DWP go through and look at their own mistakes, but they are always so heavily redacted that you can't even tell which case it's referring to. So at the first pre-inquest review, I was adamant that I not only wanted to see this IPR, but I wanted it published. I wanted everybody to be able to see exactly what had happened. And sneakily told John that it existed and that we wanted it to be made public. And he fought through multiple freedom of information requests and requested from the coroner to get it published. So we are the first family that's had the full IPR published with only one redaction, which the coroner told us was minor, which we accepted. We accepted for that to be published with one redaction. And that was in 2021. So if you think, if you look at the timeline upstairs, it says that the first death was in the early 2000s, and we are the first IPR to be published in full, which is shocking and heartbreaking that we're the first family to receive these answers and to have those questions quietened in our minds. If we come back to justice and what that would look like, I don't think that justice is possible with the current state system that we're in. You have politicians and decision makers and DWP professionals that have a culture of a lack of accountability, and they've known since the first death that this was an issue. And even before that, if you go back to the history of work capability assessments and things like that, psychologists had warned them that these are psychologically damaging, that these were going to impact on people's mental health and their well-being. And they continued anyway. I think that quote over there is so paramount to this cause, and it's dead people don't claim. When Pip was in one of the last inpatient stays at a mental health unit, she told me and warned me that this would kill her, and that I had to fight for her when it did. And for her to have to focus not on her own recovery, but on the assurance that she would receive justice for what had happened to her, breaks my heart into little pieces. That she couldn't focus on getting better. Instead, she had to focus on the fact that this happened before and would happen again after her. So until the DWP is dismantled from the top down, until people receive accountability for what they had done, justice is not possible. We need to be fighting for an entire restructure and re-implementation of our benefit system, and that includes focusing on co-production with disabled activists, with mental health activists, and with claimants that have experience of the system, so that it can be well informed and provide care and support rather than punitive action for people that are unable to work.
Justice. A lot of families, and I do too, we want the people who did what they did to our loved ones to say sorry, but we live in an adversarial situation where nobody is going to say sorry. In fact, they are going to absolve themselves of all blame whatsoever. So in the inquest for Jack, we had our barrister, and then there were about 7 other barristers for the fire brigade, the ambulance service, the mental health, the health trust, and the hospital. And every single one of them passed the buck to the others. And then I discovered that anyway, when the final decision is made, we had a jury who did exactly what the coroner told them to do. It gets put on a shelf, and nobody takes any notice of it. And you might be able to see a few emails get thrown around a hospital saying, oh, because of a recent case, and everybody knows what the case is, we're just going to be doing this instead. And just the whole system is there to protect the big state institutions. And when it comes to the police, and the Met being the worst, they have so much power. I pity the people trying to turn it around, because it just needs to be destroyed and then start again. You cannot turn around and get rid of the bad apples or whatever. It just can't be done. And the little snippets of change that have come since Jack died in the last 8 years are so tiny. I feel that to carry on, keep going, keep campaigning, but it's the big things like poverty and just the whole structure of our society and the way our communities have been destroyed. Those are the things that are going to help people. Having a friend, doing stuff and knowing people where you live and helping each other is just as good. And also thank you for saying their names. Just those things are healing. There are lots of things that help us to feel good about what happened to our loved ones. And justice is a bigger thing because, you know, trying to get those officers who did what they did is not going to happen.
I was just going to say that first time we met our lawyer, and he said, "And what do you think you'll get from all this, you know, this process?" And we said, "Oh, we want justice." And he looked, says, "There is no justice." He said, "Concentrate on something else. Put your energy into, you know, maybe making change." So, I mean, that's why for our family, you know, Shani's law coming into force, you know, was a form of justice because the hospitals and the police and that can't forget. They won't be able to forget, so it's something that's there always, you know, prodding them at the side, you know. Yeah, so that is sort of just because what I would say is that for us, forgiveness helped us. Now, when you forgive people, you don't forgive them, you forgive yourself. Forgiveness allows you to let go. I got an ulcer as a result of all the stress and worry. Because as a mum, you're worrying about the living as well as you're grieving for your loved one. So it sounds trite, but as a Christian, I was told to forgive, and I did. And that has helped me. That's helped me move on, helped me fight, helped me, help me see who they are, because you just see the rottenness in the state and the police. You know, I think forgiveness can be so many things, and for me, it's change. And Anna did say earlier, it was, you know, you can't say justice. No, because we say in UFFC, no justice, no peace. No, you don't need peace. You need change. You don't need, peace isn't necessary, really, in the sense of I mean, we need peace in the world. That is, you know, and this awful situation that's going on now is just so awful. But peace is going to be sort of the status quo returned, isn't it, really? You don't want to go back to what it was. The Palestinians don't want to go back to their little caged life in Gaza. They want to be able to go and live where they want to, you know, so it's peace, it doesn't sort of work. It's all the time. You need change, And as Anna said, equality and fairness. That's, good description of justice.
And what I'm really hearing from all of you when you talk about justice is how, you know, so this is something that I struggle with the project that we've been working on, where we talk about people's deaths and the way people are harmed because of flaws in the welfare system, or like at Pip's inquest, mistakes. And what making me realise is actually how deeply baked that kind of violence is into the system. You know, we often say it's not, it's a feature, not a bug, right, of those systems. And so justice being about that massive overhaul, that massive systematic change and institutional change. I think now would be a great chance, just if anyone would like to contribute to the session. It can be a question or a comment, or do you want to share something? You would be very welcome. Our wonderful Stephanie has got a roving mic that you could do that with. Or if any of you would like to ask questions to each other, that would also be great. So I'll stop talking, I'll sit comfortably in the silence, and I'll open up the space for anyone who might like to share anything.
Yeah, I'd like to ask, you're listening, what do you feel? How do you see the struggle? How do you see what's happened? Because Anna and I are a family of quite a few thousand. You know, it annoys me, people look to America, oh, George Floyd, yeah, and listen, George Floyd was disgraceful and awful, and it did help us sort of point a finger to what was happening here, but, you know, it really gets up my goat when I hear celebrities talking about America. No, bad things are happening here, bad things, and so I'm interested to know what you guys feel.
Hello. Like, can I do this? Can I do this? Hello. Hello. I just think, like, when I think about how much change is needed and like how at the root it is, like, I feel suffocated. Like the bigness of it, and I don't mean big, I mean bigger than big, because there's no word. Like, I feel really like determined and at the same time suffocated, and I feel that in my body. And the other thing I'm thinking about is, in order to completely pull down a state system like a benefit system and rebuild it in a way that is completely different from the kind of violence we're talking about in this room, like, also requires us to like unlearn colonial legacy, and that is both personal work for each individual and collective work, and sometimes I just grieve the lack of commitment to that and understanding that that needs to happen. But I also have compassion because I feel the suffocatedness, and I can understand why other humans are suffering to do that, and I also know that it's needed.
One thing that really helps me with that feeling of suffocation is focusing on what I as an individual can control, and that includes trying to unlearn the colonialist viewpoint that we are only worthy if we are providing. Our worth is inherent. It doesn't require us to work or to provide. It just requires us to be, and a dream of a system where that is possible. It's obviously currently quite unrealistic, but I dream of a place where we can just be and not have to worry about providing and having worth.
Hi, John Pring from Disability News Service. I've met so many of the families that, like Pip's family, over the last decade now. Difficult thoughts about all those families. I don't know how you feel about this, that you at least have been able to advocate for them after their deaths. But so many families or so many people died alone, I think, and I think that's China, the research we've done together has showed that there are so many people who will never be remembered, and at least through your work, your relatives have, their names are being remembered and memorialised as well, I think. I always feel that's really important, and I think lots of the families I've worked with have found it important to talk and found it helpful to talk about it. But that really makes me sad to all those people that will have died very, very sad, incredibly lonely deaths on their own and won't be remembered. I think that's one of the lessons I take from my research anyway.
Thank you for that. And so before we close, is there anything that you would like to say to each other, or final things you'd like to say? It's also okay to say no. Yeah.
I just want to say thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you, China, as well, for inviting us and for putting these sort of, discussions on. It's really important, to keep our voices heard, because sometimes we don't feel we're heard, we're not listened to, and that hurts. Yeah, that hurts. So and we just try and keep so many families, in people's minds. That's what we try and do, because like you say, a lot of families, they just don't want to campaign, they give up. Yeah. So I think those of us that can, we try. It takes its toll, but it's so important to do it.
Just a really quick, soppy thank you for holding love for our loved ones in this space. I can feel it. I can feel that you're thinking of the people that we loved and lost, as well as I want to take a moment for the people that aren't going to be remembered, and to bring them into this space as well, because it's obviously wonderful that we're able to campaign and talk about our loved ones, but as you said, that's not everybody's choice, not everybody's decision, and they're just as important as ours.
I was just going to say, when you have a group of people who are like-minded, UFFC, Anna and I are part of the sort of the committee, we would like to take people's emails, because we'd like you all to be friends of UFFC, because it's family and friends. We need support. So I'm going to ask China if people would like to. No obligation, please. And we are usually mums, and we get tired and we don't do anything for weeks, and then we do things. But if you don't mind, we'd love to have you as our friends of UFSC. We need friends. We do. Thank you.
And I was so struck going to the UFFC march last week about though that is around deaths linked to state custody, there are so many links to deaths within the welfare system. And I think very powerful for that kind of solidarity amongst those groups. I think families who have lost people to the welfare system would find a lot of similarity, sustenance and solidarity coming on the UFFC march. Actually, there were a lot of similarities. But thank you, I just thank you all so much. It's been, we got in touch, as I said, because we were making this podcast together, which I'd really encourage you to check out. You can find it on the Healing Justice website, and it's episode 5 of our podcast. And I just feel like I've made 3 wonderful friends through doing it, and it was a joyous conversation. And as Imogen mentioned, there were others that were part of that conversation that aren't here today, so do check it out if you can. But yeah, thank you so much to you all again. And just to say, I think, do you want to say anything about this, Fazana, or yeah, if you grab the mic. I'll finish it just after. I'll say something just after you finish. That's all right.
So after China kind of wraps up the space and thanks everyone, I'll be here for about 15-20 minutes to just do some resourcing or any kinds of techniques to support if you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed or feel like lots of things are coming up. So we can just share some techniques to just support bringing a little bit of settling or soothing or comfort to yourself. Equally, you can spend some time in the space or chatting, but you've got the option of being here and just getting some tenderness. But yeah, also just really offering a lot of gratitude for the fierce, tender and loving ways you've held us in this as well, just acknowledging that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I thought one way to end would just be, as we began with, I was saying to you about the chapter on sort of overcoming doom written by Marion Kaba in the book, Let This Radicalize Us. And they say that an antidote to the relentless drumbeat of doom is strategic and persistent collective action. And I think you've all spoken to that so beautifully. And to remember that the only way that we can be free is together. Thank you all so much for being here. And please hang out, have some snacks, and stay with us for a bit if that's what you want to do. And thank you again to our speakers and to our wonderful BSL interpreters and Rainbow Collective who've been filming it. Thank you so much. Please take care, all of you.